Hello, everyone. Hello. Good afternoon to the ones who are watching us at this moment. And according to my husband, I should say also, I also should say good evening to the ones who will see it at this moment, at other moment, and also good morning. So I like to say it, good morning and good evening. Okay, I'd like to say that all of you are welcome to this moment here. And we are here to celebrate one of the most important things that human beings have created. Yeah, we are talking about the books. Yeah, books are good. And today we have this speaker here with us, Ashley Stamper, and I'd like to introduce her to you. I need to read a brief bio. So, Ashley Stamper holds a master's degree in English composition and rhetoric with a specialization in teaching English as a second or foreign language. Furthermore, Ashley has taught in higher education for more than a decade and also served as a virtual educator for the Office of English Language Programs, which is sponsored by the U.S. Department of State. Over the last several years, Ashley has had the opportunity to teach students in 7 countries. She is passionate about education, yeah, and in her free time, she loves to read and research. So, this is your time, Ashley. Good
Thank you
afternoon.
so much. Yes, so I'm very excited to be here with you all today. And I was very excited when you asked me to do this webinar because I love to read. I love to share my love of reading with other people. So we are going to have a great time today talking about this special holiday or this special day that we are celebrating. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you all today. Can you
Okay.
see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay, there we go. I
Yeah, it's
think this
going
one.
red. Yeah.
Great. Okay.
Yes, it's okay now.
Okay, so today we are going to talk about the history and the importance of the book. And this is a reason to celebrate. I'm not sure if everyone is aware, but yesterday was a very special day. It was the World Book and Copyright Day. That is the official title. And this special holiday or commemorative day was founded by UNESCO about 30 years ago. And since then, every year on April 23rd, we celebrate the World Book and Copyright Day. I think most people probably know it as World Book Day. Now, the reason they chose April 23rd is because this day commemorates the death of several important figures in literary history, and I have listed them on the screen. So today we are celebrating World Book Day, and we are going to do this by looking at several key ideas about the book. So here are our 5 main points for our agenda today. We are going to start by briefly discussing the history and the evolution of the book. We will then talk about the modern globalization of the book. Next, we will discuss the benefits of books and reading. And we will also talk about technology and books. And lastly, number 5, at the end of my webinar today, I have some challenges for you to complete, okay? So I wanted to begin by clarifying that a lot of the historical information that I will share comes from this book, A Companion History of the book. And this book was very helpful as I was doing my research, and I think it would be very helpful for you as well if you want to explore this topic in much more detail. Okay, so today I'm just going to give a brief overview of the history of the book, but I encourage you to obtain a copy of this book so you can go more in depth. Okay, so the history and evolution of the book. This is our very first point for today. Before I tell you about this topic, I want you to tell me what you already know. Okay, so I have a question for everyone in the audience. It says, what were the first books like? Based on your own knowledge of the history of the book, can you think of what the first books were like? Okay, and I would like to hear your thoughts. So we are going to take about 45 seconds so that you can share your ideas in the comments section of this video. So let's go ahead and take 45 seconds for everyone to answer this question. What were the first books like? There are no wrong answers. I just want to know, what do you already know about this topic? Okay, so let's take 45 seconds, and after 45 seconds are complete, we will then continue with this first point.
These questions are to the audience here.
Okay, I see that some people are starting to answer this question. Feel free to answer even after I continue talking. Thank you so much for those that shared their answers to this question. What were the first books like? Now, there are a lot of possible answers for this question because it depends on how you look at the history of the book. I want to share an interesting quote from Eleanor Robson. She tells us, if a book is a collection of pages bound together and sold on the open market, then there were no books in the ancient Middle East. If, on the other hand, a book is a means of recording and transmitting in writing a culture's intellectual traditions, then there were very many. And there is a rich and extraordinary history of the ancient Middle Eastern book to be explored and told. So what she's trying to say is that when we think of the history of the book, we have to keep an open mind, because the way we think about books now is a little different than how books originated. Let's start by looking at this interesting image, okay? When we talk about books, we first have to talk about the development of writing systems. As you probably know, writing was not as common in the past, and it developed over a long period of time. And in order for books to be developed, we first had to see writing developed. And I want to read a really interesting quote from Ira Spar at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. She says, "Recent archaeological research indicates that the origin and the spread of writing may be more complex than previously thought. Over time, pictographic representation was replaced with wedge-shaped signs, and this is what we see in the image on the screen. And this type of writing was made by using the tip of a reed or a wood stylus, and they would press those into the surface of a clay tablet. And as it says here on the screen, eventually cuneiform writing, this type of writing, it was primarily written on clay tablets, and it was used for a vast array of economic, religious, political, literary, and scholarly documents." So we see the evolution of the writing system, and this naturally led to the evolution of the book, right? Now, these tablets obviously do not resemble modern books, but we have to start here to understand how we went from this basic writing system to actual books and well-developed texts that eventually became books as we know them today. Of course, this writing system, the production of books, have undergone many changes throughout history, and we are going to look again briefly at this evolution. So when we talk about books, we can say that one of the first books can be seen in the creation of ancient scrolls, like the one that you see here on the screen. And these ancient scrolls, again, they really do not resemble our modern type of books, but this is where we started. And as I was researching specifically about scrolls, I was very interested to learn about the different types of scroll books that existed in the past. For example, we can see here a type of book that could be rolled into a scroll. And this book originated in China. Here, the quote from J.S. Edgren says, "The earliest Chinese books of bamboo or wooden strips, however practical they may seem, became heavy and awkward when a complete text was assembled, and they were not conducive to the wide circulation of texts." So this ancient book is beautiful. I love how it looks, and I love how the pieces of wood are connected with the cords, and we can imagine how this was rolled into a scroll. However, as the quote explains, this was not super practical, especially if you had a very developed text. And so something that we see throughout history is that people were trying to develop books that were more practical, that were more accessible, and that is how we eventually arrived at the type of book that we have today. But of course, like I said, there were many steps in this process. So one of the next major phases in the evolution of the book was the development of a codex, or a codex type book. And these became increasingly popular. Here on the screen, we can see an example of a codex type book. And a codex is basically an ancient text in book form. And you can see this codex looks very similar to our modern style of books. Of course, it's probably much bigger and a little more difficult to transport, but this was the next phase in the evolution of the book. Now, Cornelia Romer explains that a codex was a lot more practical. For example, it was less fragile than a scroll, and it was also more solid. When they folded the book, it was a lot sturdier. It would not get pressed so easily as a scroll would. It would not become so damaged because it had the covers, and the pages could lay flat on each other. Also, a codex was much better because it had more space to write. You could write on each side of the page, and so it gave more space for recording the information. Also, a codex is a lot easier to open and close. You could go to an exact page instead of unrolling an entire scroll just to find one piece of information. So in general, a codex was an improvement on the ancient scroll. Okay, now we're going to fast forward because I don't have time to talk about every phase in the evolution of the book, but I want to talk about a very, very important part of the history of the book. And this happened in the 1400s. I'm going to ask you all another question, and I'm going to see how many people know the answer to this question. It says, what was the invention that changed the evolution of the book forever? Does anyone know this answer? If you think you might know the answer, please share your ideas in the comments section. Again, what was the invention that changed the evolution of the book forever? I'm going to give you about 20 seconds to answer this question in the comments section. There are no wrong answers. I just want to hear your ideas. Okay, so 20 seconds, share your ideas in the comments section.
Does it have to do with a machine? Yeah. So it's a clue.
That's a good hint. It has to do with some type of machine. Very good.
Yeah. I think we have an answer.
Okay, let's see what the answer is, and let's compare your ideas. Okay, here we go. I'm going to share the answer to this question. It is the Gutenberg printing press. Okay,
Yeah.
this was the invention that changed the history of the book forever. And we can see a replica of this printing press on the screen. There is some debate about what it actually looked like, but this is one interpretation of Gutenberg's printing press. Now, I'm going to read some information that explains why this invention was so important. Encyclopedia Britannica explains that the printing press made it possible to produce books and other texts very quickly. They were also produced accurately and less expensively, which allowed them to be reproduced in greater numbers. Before the printing press, books belonged primarily to the upper classes, but with books being cheaper and more readily available, the middle classes could access them as well. This led to an increase in the literacy and education of the public. And it says the development of the printing press has been credited with helping to usher in the modern era and by enabling the spread of information across all levels of society. So basically, in summary, this invention really made books and information accessible to everyone. And it was a lot easier to distribute books and information because of this invention. And so I wanted to focus on this because it played such an important part in the evolution of the book and the evolution of the distribution of books and information. Because of this invention, information was no longer something that only belonged to the upper classes. It was now available to the general public, right? And this increased literacy in all levels of society. Now, I thought it might be interesting to learn a little bit about what types of books were being produced and who was buying these books at this time. David Shaw explains, a lot can be deduced from the range of titles produced. 3/4 of the books published in the 15th century were in Latin. By the end of the 16th century, over half were in the vernacular languages or non-Latin languages. This indicates that a large proportion of book buyers still belonged to the educated and professional classes who had learned Latin at school and university, like doctors, lawyers, clerics, teachers, as well as those from well-to-do families who had received a similar education. Nevertheless, the growing proportion of books in the vernacular languages shows the growth of literacy in the general population, especially in urban areas in Protestant countries, which put a high value on the ability to read the Bible. So we see again, this spread of literacy is directly connected to the easier distribution of books and specifically in the vernacular languages, not only in Latin, but in the other languages that people spoke every day. Now, we need to fast forward a little bit, and I want to just summarize and say that gradual technological improvements to the printing press continue to make books more accessible to the general public by automating the process. Over time, they were improving the production and the distribution of books, and more people could access them. I thought this was an interesting moment to share. I think many people are familiar with Penguin books. They have this logo of a little penguin. And in 1935, the first Penguin paperbacks were introduced in the United Kingdom. And this sparked a paperback revolution. And as you know, paperback books are typically cheaper than other types of books like hardback books. And this allowed even more people to continue enjoying books and reading. And one of the main reasons that this company was founded was to provide cheap literature, but also good quality literature to the general public. And so over time, we see this desire to provide books and information to more and more people at a reasonable price and in a way that can be mass produced. Okay, and one of these examples is Penguin Books. And I have read Penguin Books, and maybe you have too. Now,
Ashley,
yeah,
excuse me, Ashley. But yeah, it has to do with our life in colleges. Yeah, here in Brazil, we read a lot of these books, at least where I studied. So I really, it is a good memory to me.
I'm glad that you're familiar with these. I think they have become pretty popular internationally. And I think it's an example of what can happen when you make books available to people at a reasonable price. They are going to be distributed and enjoyed by people, even in other countries, like you said. So, something interesting to note is that even though we have seen a lot of technological advances in the history of the book, we still use printing presses. We still have to use printing presses in order to produce and mass distribute books. However, the printing presses have come a long way. They are very sophisticated, and many times they are very large. I wanted to give an example of the Lakeside Book Company, which is one of the largest publishing companies in the United States. And in this picture, you can see one of their printing presses and the paper that goes into the printing press. Now it says, these giant rolls of paper have been lined up for a day of printing, just one day. The press itself is a Goliath. It's huge. It is 26 feet wide and 127 feet long and weighs about 200,000 pounds. According to Lakeside, you could park 6 semi-trucks in that machine, and it would take all 6 of those trucks to move it. So this is really interesting in my opinion. We've come a long way. We are able to utilize computerized technology even for the printing process, but we are still using printing machines and printing presses, but they look a lot different. And I would love to know what Gutenberg would think of this machine that they are using nowadays. He probably could never have imagined how much the printing press would evolve. And obviously, these machines that we have now, they can produce so many pages of text every day. And this it allows, again, books to be distributed even more readily than in the past. So this is where we are at today. Now, we have seen a little bit of the history and the evolution of the book, but now I want to shift our focus to the modern globalization of the book. Now that the book is so easily distributed, it has become a global something that everyone globally can enjoy. And something that I wanted to share was the example of the Oxford English Dictionary. And this was produced back in 1989, but this is where we really started to see how global this process can be. Paul Luna explains the composition of the Oxford English Dictionary in 1989 confirmed the globalization of text composition and book production in this period. Data capture took place in the US. Much of the software was written in Canada. System management and text processing were done in Oxford, typesetting in the north of England, and printing and binding in the US. We have several countries involved in this process, or several locations. In comparison with the production of the first edition, as John Trevitt has written, what was a connected sequence of interdependent activities carried out under one roof has become a set of discrete functions, each of which may be performed anywhere in the world. So thanks to the technology that we have nowadays, we can produce and distribute books in a globalized international way. We do not need all of the process to be done in one location. And we can look for the best way to produce and distribute based on the context, the needs of that book. And so this is where we really just see how far we have come with the expansion of the book industry in the world. And this was back in 1989. You can imagine nowadays how global this process really is. Now, I wanted to share some concerns with you regarding the globalization of the book. It says here, even though publishers are globalizing the book production process, the global book market is still dominated by books originally published in English. And you probably are very aware of this. And another concern, which is quoted here, says English language publishers have a lamentable or sad track record when it comes to translating great stories from elsewhere in the world. So basically what this is saying is that even though books are a global thing, we still see most books being published in English as the original language, and then later they are translated to other languages. But we do not see the reverse. We do not see as many books in other languages being translated into English. So I wanted to ask you this question. What book translations do you think people should read from your country? If we could translate something from your country, or maybe it already is translated, what book should people read? And I'd like you to take about 45 seconds to just list a book and, if possible, the author in the comments section. I would love to see some books that you would recommend that were originally published in your language and that you would like other people to read as well. So let's take 45 seconds for you to share at least one book in the comments section. Okay?
So, which books would do you suggest? I mean, the audience would suggest to us. This is what we want to know now. Good.
Yes. Yes. And I think most of the audience today is from Brazil. And so, in other words, what books that are originally produced in Portuguese do you think should other people read? And maybe they're already translated, maybe not, but what would you recommend? Specifically books that were originally produced in your home country, in your home language.
Oh, how nice. There are good suggestions here.
Excellent.
Yeah, Renata is talking about Machado de Assis, which is a very good writer. I mean, one of the most important writers in our country.
Awesome.
Thank you so
Later,
much.
after the presentation, I will take time to look at all of your ideas, and thank you all for sharing. Well, we are going to continue. I wanted to share this statistic or this graph because this shows the disproportionate amount of books that are produced in English. And obviously, I speak English. That is my um, native language. And I'm excited that we have a lot of books in English. But at the same time, I would love to see more books produced in other original languages. Here you can see English is at the top of the list, and there are many, many more books produced in English than in other languages. My second language is Spanish, and so Spanish is at number 6 on this list, and Portuguese is at number 18. And so we would love to see, more Portuguese books produced and more Spanish, more Russian, more Japanese books produced so that we could balance these numbers a little bit more. And I also personally would love to see more books translated from other original languages so that people in English speaking countries can enjoy more of the literature from around the world. And so I think, by focusing on producing books in a variety of languages and then translating them to a variety of languages, we can better appreciate literature and we can contribute to the globalization of the book, specifically the healthy globalization of the book. So let's look at something else in this category. I wanted to share an interesting global phenomenon, which is book banning. Okay. As books have become more available throughout the world in most countries, most people have access to books. And we have also seen that governments have tried to limit this distribution of books in some ways. And when we talk about book banning or prohibiting reading certain books, we can talk about some different factors that contribute to these decisions. For example, some governments may ban or prohibit books because those books contain politically sensitive information that they do not want the general audience or general public to read about. There may also be restricted cultural topics. We sometimes call these taboo topics. These are topics that are not culturally appropriate, and sometimes those are banned. Sometimes governments may ban books because they have inappropriate sexual topics, or they may ban books because of some religious content that the government is not in agreement with. And so we have seen as books have become more globalized and more accessible internationally, we have also seen this attempt to ban books by certain governments. And this is also a global phenomenon. And so, thinking of this topic, I would like to know your feelings about this. How do you feel about governments banning books? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think that it is appropriate in some cases, perhaps? What are your ideas about this topic? Let's take another 45 seconds, maybe 1 minute, to share our ideas in the comment section. You do not need to share a really long response. Just 1 or 2 sentences is sufficient, okay? So I am anxious to hear your thoughts about this question. How do you feel about governments banning books?
Okay, it's a good question. I'm curious about this because although some governments can banning books, but what about the access on the web? Is it possible to ban? I mean, because today we have a different way to access books in general. So I think it's not. I think it's not possible to ban everything because people will find a way to find books.
That's a great point. That's another question, right? Is it even possible to ban books? I think then we have to talk about the government not only monitoring the books, but also monitoring the internet, right? So if they're going to ban a book and also ban the electronic copy, then they have to start monitoring people's internet usage. And that, in English, we would say that opens a whole can of worms. That leads to other issues that we would have to discuss. But that's a good point. Yes. The internet makes it a little more difficult to censor what people are seeing and what people are reading.
We've got an answer here. Yeah, someone is saying that banning a book is a way to silence in a voice. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah. And there will be different opinions about this because there are different factors to consider. But I did want to mention this because this has been a secondary result of books becoming more international. We have also seen governments around the world banning books and trying to limit what people are actually reading. So I thought this was an interesting topic when I was researching. Let's continue on, and feel free to keep sharing your ideas, but we are going to move along with our third topic for today, which is the benefits of books. We have talked about the history, we've talked about the globalization of books, and now we need to talk about the benefits of books. So you can probably guess that there are some obvious benefits of books. For example, reading exercises the brain, right? Whenever we read, we have to analyze the story, memorize details, evaluate the character development. There is so much that goes into reading. It is also a form of entertainment, and it can also be a free form of entertainment. For example, if we utilize a public library, if we share books and borrow books with friends, sometimes we can even find free ebooks online. And so it's a little more accessible sometimes as a form of entertainment. Also, reading improves concentration and the ability to focus. Usually, when we read, we really have to be concentrating on that activity. Perhaps some people might also do audiobooks and try to do other activities at the same time, but generally, reading does require a certain level of focus. Also, reading obviously improves our literacy, and it can also improve our sleep. A lot of people have the routine or the habit of reading before they go to sleep. And this is a really good habit, and it can help calm us and improve our sleep. Obviously, reading increases general knowledge. When we read more, we learn more, and we can actually talk about more topics with other people. Reading can also be motivational because we might be inspired by what we're reading. It can also help reduce stress, and we are going to talk about this in a little bit. Reading can also set a positive example. For example, when younger children see an adult, a parent, or an older sibling reading, it really sets a great example for early literacy. And then, of course, reading teaches empathy. When we read, we usually have to put ourselves in another person's shoes so that we can understand what they are experiencing. And this is a great way to increase empathy. I apologize for the background noise. It's raining where I live, so I hope you can hear me okay. Is my sound clear? Okay,
Yes,
excellent.
yes, it is.
Excellent. Okay. So as I was saying in the previous list, reading can really help to reduce stress. And there have been some studies that try to show the relationship between reading and reducing stress. And I was really interested to learn about something called bibliotherapy. Now, bibliotherapy is a therapeutic approach employing books and other forms of literature. And it is usually done alongside more traditional therapy. And bibliotherapy really helps to support a patient's mental health. And though the books recommended by therapists can be from different genres or different types of books, bibliotherapists typically make use of fiction. So when I was researching, I did not know that bibliotherapy existed. And I was very interested to learn that some therapists are incorporating books as a way to help people improve their mental and emotional health. And I was like, that's wonderful. I love to read, so hopefully I can improve my mental and emotional health with that, right? So I was very interested to learn about this, and I'm curious to know in the future if more therapists will start to incorporate bibliotherapy, and will it be considered a formal style of therapy? I'm really curious to know what the evolution of bibliotherapy will look like. Now, in addition,
Actually, excuse me. Let me say something. I think that there is a great, it's a wide list of benefits of reading. Yeah. So, in my opinion, it deserves another moment to talk about all of them, of these benefits. Oh my God, it's so good.
yeah, that is so true. Today's presentation is a summary of a lot of information, and I encourage you all to explore these topics in more detail on your own. But yeah, I wanted to make sure to focus on some of the benefits of reading and books because this really shows us it's not just about liking to read or not. There really are benefits to reading and enjoying books. Now, we talked about some of the normal benefits. We've now also talked about emotional or mental health benefits, and we can also talk about cognitive health benefits. I found two quotes that I thought summarized this topic well. The Alzheimer's Society indicates that people can reduce their risk of dementia by staying mentally and socially active. And they suggest one activity could be reading books or becoming a member of a book club. And the National Institute on Aging reiterates that findings from observational studies suggest that some informal, mentally stimulating activities, such as reading or playing games, may lower the risk of Alzheimer's related cognitive impairment and dementia. So, in other words, reading can be a helpful way to improve our cognitive health and prevent or maybe reduce the effects of these types of diseases that affect our cognitive health. And so I thought this was fascinating, and it makes me want to read even more than I do now. So I wanted to share those benefits with you, and I want to ask you another question. In your personal life, what benefits have you experienced from reading? Go ahead and take about 45 seconds to share your ideas in the comments section. Again, what benefits have you personally experienced from reading? And maybe you experienced benefits that I did not list here, and feel free to share whatever comes to your mind.
Let me share my experience with you. I mean, with all of you that are here. Well, I think that one benefit I have experienced lately is it calms down. Yeah, it calms me down. When I read, I need to do it because I want to to feel comfortable. So I've read because of that. And sometimes, of course, it read because I need. So it will be comfortable to me to prepare to write about the subjects that I like to write. So I read articles about linguistic, and I do this because I need, but it's also because I feel comfortable when I read this the material concerning about this field. So I like to do it in both cases. Read for obligation, or reading for pleasure. It makes me calm down and relax.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing. Everybody will experience different benefits, but I think we can all agree there are benefits, right? So I will be looking at your responses a little later. So I would like to read all of the benefits that you list. We are going to now move on to our very last point for today, our last key idea, which will discuss technology and books. Now, as you definitely know, we now have a new revolution, perhaps, and that is ebooks. Ebooks are everywhere. Everyone is using ebooks, or at least most people have used ebooks at some point. And as you know, ebooks are electronic books, and these are very accessible because we can access them without printing them. Now, I was looking for some information about this topic, and the Toronto Metropolitan University shared this comparison of the advantages and the disadvantages of ebooks. And let's look and see what they say. The advantages. Ebooks are usually low in cost, and they also are not very heavy because the weight is only the weight of the tablet or the e-reader that you are using. Also, you can fit multiple ebooks on one device. It's like a little library, right? And you can also access ebooks immediately. They're very easy to access. Now, of course, there are some disadvantages. Ebooks can be more difficult to read for some people. They have a limited screen area. They actually might not be, how should I say, lighter. They might not be lighter than some other paperback books. Getting a tablet or an e-reader could be expensive, and if you lose it or if you damage it, you're going to have to figure out how to access all of the content that was there. And also, obviously, ebooks, the device requires some type of battery or some type of power in order to function. So with any technological advancement, there's always advantages and disadvantages, but a lot of people are enjoying ebooks as a new technology, or not a new technology, but a very common technology that we use now. And something that I wanted to mention is that ebooks have been very helpful for a lot of students, because nowadays a lot of schools and institutions are asking their students to use ebooks or e-textbooks, because this helps lower the costs of education. And so this is perhaps another advantage that we could talk about, is that students in many schools are able to access their textbooks online, and this reduces the costs of education and makes learning, again, more accessible. Now, one other thing that I wanted to talk about is something that I'm calling e-publishing. And e-publishing is the activity or the business of preparing and issuing books electronically. Okay, so this is just the distribution and the sale of books through an electronic medium. And I wanted to share one example of a platform that is doing this, e-publishing. I'm sure everyone is familiar with Amazon, and Amazon has something called Kindle Direct Publishing. And I pulled this image from their website. It says, self-publish ebooks and paperbacks for free with Kindle Direct Publishing and reach millions of readers on Amazon. And the first line says, publishing takes less than 5 minutes and your book appears on Kindle stores worldwide within 72 hours. Now, I'm not sure if it really takes 5 minutes, but basically it is a quicker process. And with the technology of the ebook, the technology of e-publishing, literally anyone in the world can publish their own book. And they can do it, in this case, they can do it for free, and they can access an audience of millions of readers within a few days. I mean, this is, I think, revolutionary, this technology that we have now and the opportunities that we have now. And like I said before, I would love to know what Gutenberg would think of this. The fact that anybody, anywhere, almost, can publish their own book and can distribute it using a platform like this. Of course, there are other e-publishing platforms, but Amazon is very well known, right? So Amazon is just one of many platforms, but the point that I'm trying to make is that technology has really improved, again, the distribution and even the publishing of these books, even by people from the general public. So definitely reading has come a long way. It's a global phenomenon now, and reading is not the only thing that people are doing. Now, normal people like you, like me, they are publishing their own books. It's amazing. So even with all of this technology, I thought it was interesting to do a comparison of what people prefer, digital books versus print books. And I found a study that the Pew Research Center did in 2021. And basically what this study concluded is that even with all the technological options, it seems that people still prefer print books, and they use ebooks or audiobooks in addition to print books. But when they looked at who only uses digital books, it was actually a very small percentage of people who only use digital books. What they found is that most people are using both print and digital books, and about 1/3 of the participants are only using print books still. And so I thought this was an interesting, I don't know, statistic, because even though we have all these technological advances and all of this, I guess, evolutionary process of the book, people still like to read a normal print book, or at least the majority. And it's very few people who are only reading digital books. And I think most people, like you, like me, we read a combination of print books and digital books. And we may do this for different reasons. In my case, I always try to buy print books because I love to read the real book in my hands. I love to be able to turn the pages. But if I can't purchase the print book easily, or maybe it's too expensive, I may need to look at other options like digital books. And so in my case, I'm part of the group that uses both print and digital, but I definitely prefer print books. But that's just my opinion. I'm curious, what do you prefer? Do you prefer digital books or print books, and why? Or perhaps you like them both for different reasons. We're going to take another 45 seconds to share our ideas for this question. Do you prefer digital books or print books, and why? Or do you prefer them both, but for different reasons?
I should say that I really prefer print books because of that sensation, that feeling of turning the page, as you said, and it has to do with a place. It has to do with a kind of a moment that you. It's different. It's not only the book, but the sofa itself, and the place where you are, um, like you are just taking, you are just having pleasure with that. So it's good. I prefer print books because of this, yeah, because of the feeling of touch something. I mean, to turn the pages and to see what is going to happen next moment, it's good.
Yeah, I think I can relate to you. It's maybe a more personal experience when you have the book with you. Another reason that I like print books is that I can focus better when I can see it on the page, because sometimes I have found it difficult to focus on the screen when I'm reading an ebook. But there are other people who love ebooks because they can keep all of their books in one place. I mean, I have a bookshelf beside me right now, and if I want to transport my books, we're going to need many boxes. But if I put all my books on a Kindle or an e-reader, I can take all my books with me wherever I go. So, of course, there are advantages and disadvantages. So I'm really excited to hear what your preferences are. And we are going to continue, but please feel free to keep responding to all of these questions. And I will be reading through all your responses later when I can do it in more detail and a little more slowly. Okay, we are going to our last point for today. And this is actually a challenge for you. And there are two parts to this challenge. The part that I'm going to talk about right now is that I would like to challenge you to read at least one book in the next 2 months. And I want to offer some tips for doing this, okay? And if you say this is really easy, then I will challenge you to read 2 books in the next 2 months, okay? But for now, the minimum is 1 book. When we try to implement a habit of reading, it's very important that you pick a topic or a genre that interests you. On the screen, I have listed several types of books. This is not a comprehensive list of all the genres, but these are some of the popular ones. For example, you might enjoy fantasy books. You might like biography. This is one of my favorites. I love biographies. You might like graphic novels or like comic book style books. You might also enjoy cookbooks. Cookbooks are a genre of reading. You might also like science fiction, romance, theology or religion, history, crime, technology. There are so many genres, so many topics. Surely you can find something that interests you that you would like to read about in the next 2 months. Also, I suggest that you choose a format that is best for you. Like I said, in my case, I love print books, but other people may prefer ebooks, or if you're really busy and you just can't sit down that often, maybe you could do an audiobook and you can listen to it in the car. You can listen to it while you're cooking, but there are different formats that you can choose to make reading easier for you. And I also suggest that you set aside time for reading each day or each week. Some people might say at the end of the day, before I go to bed, I'm going to read 20 minutes in my book. Or if you cannot do it every day, you might say every Friday during the month, I'm going to read for 1 hour. These are just some examples, okay? Now, my second challenge for you, this is part 2 of the challenge. I would like you to gift a book to someone else in the next 2 months, okay? So give or gift a book to someone else in the next 2 months. I'm going to give you this challenge. I want us to be more like Iceland. And what do I mean by that? Let's read about a really cool tradition that they have in Iceland. It says, the Christmas book flood. The culture of giving books as presents is very deeply rooted in how families perceive Christmas as a holiday, says Christian B. Jonasson, president of the Iceland Publishers Association. Normally, we give the presents on the night of the 24th, and people spend the night reading. In many ways, it's the backbone of the publishing sector here in Iceland. Now, they have this tradition at Christmas, but we are not in the Christmas season right now. So why don't you give a book to someone for another special occasion? For example, we just celebrated World Book Day. This could be a reason to give someone a book. Maybe for a birthday, an anniversary, a graduation. There are so many special occasions that we celebrate, and it would be great to develop the tradition of giving books as gifts. This is something that I love to do, and I often give my children books for their birthdays and other special occasions. And I think this really develops a good habit, and it can encourage other people to read. Now, I thought this was another interesting quote about this tradition in Iceland. It says, a recent Center for Icelandic Literature survey of more than 1,400 Icelanders found that they read an average of 2.4 books per month. Nearly a third of the population reads every day, and more than a third have used library services in the last 12 months. Reykjavik, I think that's how you pronounce it, became the 5th UNESCO City of Literature in 2011, and Iceland is consistently ranked among the most literate countries in the world based on metrics like achievement tests, as well as characteristics like average total years of schooling, and publications in libraries. So basically what we're seeing, this country, Iceland, that has a tradition of giving books as gifts, they also have very high literacy rates and very strong literacy habits. And so I think that this challenge of giving a book could be a great way to improve literacy in your family, your circle of friends, and even perhaps your whole country, right? So we have come to the end of this presentation. Thank you so much for listening about the history and the evolution of the book, modern globalization of the book, benefits of the book, and technology and books. These are the 4 main points that we discussed. And of course, I gave you a challenge. Number 1, read at least 1 book in the next 2 months. And number 2, give a book as a gift to someone else in the next 2 months. Now, if you are ready to take on this challenge, I would like you to give the video a thumbs up so that I know how many people are going to accept this challenge of reading at least 1 book and gifting at least 1 book. Go ahead and give this video a thumbs up if you are ready to take on this challenge, okay? Thank you all so much. That's it from me, but I'm happy to stick around if anyone has questions or anything like that.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you so much for such a bunch of information here. I'm very pleased to be here and can listen to all this information. Thank you. Yeah. Well, we have been talking here for about an hour, and I don't know if you have questions, but maybe it's late. I mean, if you have any questions, you can do it. You can write down there. I mean, here at this virtual place, and we'll see then after. Yeah, because it's not, we don't have enough time anymore. So let me see here if there's someone who are interested in making questions at least once. Oh yeah, we have a comment. Yeah, you can write questions here as Renato is telling us. And I think time is up. And I'd like to say thank you again, and thank you for all of this team, the great team that is here working at this moment. Kanti, my dearest Kanti, you were just wonderful. Thank you so much. And Renato is the other teacher of English. I mean, it's the half teacher, because we have two teachers of English here in this place where we work. And he is just a half part of it, you know. And thank you so much, Renato. And I'd like to say thank to the whole local team which works with subjects related to the internationalization of this place, you know. And I think that's all. Ashley, you were great. You were solicitous with us. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
Goodbye. Goodbye, everyone.